Hey everybody, welcome back for another episode of the Silver Lyming. I'm grateful to be here with another fabulous guest, Ethan Jones. He's joined us from Virginia. He has been in public safety for over a decade. He's in his mid-30s, and this is again another human that I have met through the beauty of social media. So grateful for that connection. I've learned so much from Ethan, and if you don't follow him, you should definitely check out his Instagram page. He's just got a wealth of knowledge, and he's also on YouTube. And you're under, is it 123 reset? Help me.
Yes, subscore. Yeah, 123 subscore reset, subscore rebuild, subscore revive.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
I know it's you when I see it, so I'm always like, yeah. But he goes through so much information and really shares a lot about different herbs and just wonderful things. He's also got a degree now from the functional medicine certificate from the Health Institute. And he is like a lot of us Lyme people who have been sick for a fair amount of time, unfortunately, but has really rebuilt himself and reset and revived himself. And he's sharing a lot of this information with us to help us all learn more to help heal ourselves. But without further ado, Ethan, if you could please share with us a little bit more about your story with Lyme disease and how you became involved in this wonderful space.
Yeah, sure. And thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I always find your interviews so insightful, and very informative. So I'll just get started by kind of going in chronological order of, when I first started noticing symptoms. Of course, I'm 33 now. So this first started back in like 98 to 2002 timeframe. So I was only like 8 to 12 years old. I kind of had my first panic episode. I just remember I was at a playground. I'd been playing outside, and I went to go get a Slurpee afterwards, and I just kind of had this sinking feeling in my stomach, and then I felt like I had to run to the restroom, and then next thing you know, I was getting like heart palpitations, and I just kind of I didn't know what was going on, so I just kind of overcame that and was kind of like, I don't know what happened there, but as a kid, you're like, I don't know what's going on, like this is just a crazy experience. So several years went by, but I just kind of had this like underlying anxiety that was going on, pretty frequently. I had attention problems. I had like ADHD type, OCD type problems. So problems with school. I would have trouble with like reading and like writing and stuff. So, and I was homeschooled, so I'm sure I gave my mom hell for for many years. I also experienced some issues with like sleeping as well. Not so much staying asleep, but like just going to sleep. So my hormones were probably out of whack at that time already. I have multiple ear infections. Ear infections were always a big problem for me. I had strep throat. I remember having, around that time frame as well, probably about 11, 12 years old. And then at that point, I noticed some GI upset that was going on. Some intermittent stomach problems, just abdominal pain, but it was very infrequent. So I didn't really think anything of it. And, I'm a kid, so I'm like, I don't really, I'm like, I guess everybody's like this, I guess this is just the way it's supposed to be. So then moving on to like 03, 07 timeframe, 2003 to 2007. So I'm like, young teenager to mid-teens at this point. The attention problems kept going on. I just remember like, I just wanted to be outside all the time. So obviously I was exposed to, ticks quite frequently, being, in the mid-Atlantic. So I had attention problems still going on, still trouble with reading and writing. Yeah, it seemed to be more of like an attention thing. Like I was just having trouble paying attention, and, I just always wanted to be on the go all the time. Sleep issues continued on. I just remember lying awake, insomnia really badly, especially going into my teenage years. And then I had some newer issues kind of come up with like, I started having issues with like anger, like getting, anger management problems as a teenager, just getting upset at stuff that would be kind of mundane. I noticed that a lot of like I had friends growing up, but they weren't like, I was homeschooled and stuff, so I kind of was friends with other homeschoolers. But I noticed that like I wasn't very good at maintaining relationships, in particular. So, I had a few kind of long-term friends, and that was really it. I didn't really, I wasn't good at, engaging in conversation, I would say, with, other people as a young to mid-teen. And So then I also noticed that, I played baseball growing up, and I had some pretty bad shoulder problems as well, like along the outside of the shoulder here. And actually, knowing what I know now, that's actually kind of the small intestine um, acupuncture line that would go, up and down the outside of your arm, which kind of makes sense because I was having a lot of issues with digestion at that point. And that's the weak part of your body, when you're, which I didn't know. I was a teenager. I had no idea what acupuncture was. I was like, that's kind of woo woo or whatever you want to call it at the time. So, yeah. And then I noticed, so I hadn't really had any like panic episode, like ever since like that time that I went to get a Slurpee, but, like I did have another one kind of when I was probably like 15, 16 time frame. So several years later, I just remember I was like walking outside out on the front walkway, and like all of a sudden, like I just had this overwhelming, like, it was almost like, this pain, like I wouldn't say really pain, but it was just like, anxiety and like this oppression was just kind of like over me. And it just came out of nowhere, which was like super weird. But knowing what I know now, like, Bartonella can cause that, Babesia. So, it has a lot of psychiatric problems. So, but it wasn't just I just want to make sure, make it clear that it was not just the mental part of it, but the physical part of it too. Like I was having physical symptoms as well, like the increase in heart rate, like the GI upset, stuff like that. And then, uh, yeah, so I also started having, I had said I'd had like some intermittent abdominal pain and like, maybe some diarrhea here or there. But I also started having like some acid reflux, so coming back up as well, around like my mid-teens time frame. So like 15, 16, 17. And then also, I started having some, some skin issues as well around this age, where it was like, I would just feel like something was crawling right outside of my skin, but I would look and nothing would be there. It would just be like, yeah, I would call them like ghost crawls or whatever. It was really creepy. And I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. And, it's maybe like something like paresthesia like could cause that possibly, but there's other tick-borne infections that can cause those sensations as well. So, I didn't really think anything of it. And then I also started having keratosis pilaris, so like the red bumps that are on the outside or the arms and stuff. I started getting that pretty badly around my mid-teens as well. And then I also noticed I was getting like some weight gain too here and there, but then I started working out and that went away. So moving on to like the '08 to like 2012 time frame. So like I'm on, later teen to young adult now. And I was having GI problems. I think I had like a couple more ear infections, like around the '03 to '07 time frame. So of course I've had multiple rounds of antibiotics at this time. So my gut's already been destroyed, depleted multiple times. And, I didn't really know anything about nutrition. I was kind of like what they called like a big bone individual. I was always larger, I would say, than most of the other people that were, in my class or on my team or whatever. So if somebody ever needed something moved, they're always like, oh, choose Ethan, because he's big and strong. So that was kind of me, right? I was like big and strong, and I was resilient and all that good stuff. I ate a lot of pasta growing up. I love my favorite food was like spaghetti and lasagna, pizza, all that good stuff. So I was like, veggies, what is that? I don't know what veggie is.
I'm allergic to that.
Right? Yeah, pretty much. Especially cooked vegetables. Ugh. So yeah, around the 08 to 12, like 2012 time frame, I had been working out, but I stopped working out like as I went on to college and stuff, and I kind of got away from the working out part of it. And I ended up putting on a fair amount of weight, probably a good, what do they call it, the freshman 20 or whatever, or 15. So, I put on a little bit of weight, and, I was always around like 210, like 200 to 210. And then I went to like 225, 230, 235. So, and I had GI problems throughout college. Of course, my diet in college probably wasn't the best either. And then, I also started having some fatigue issues in college as well. I would, I never really pulled like all-nighters or anything, but my sleep issues continued on. I had always kind of been insomnia. It wasn't like I would kind of go through phases where I would have more insomnia, or it wasn't so much that I was insomnia, but I would wake up, but I just wouldn't feel very well rested. And I would just, I'd be fatigued throughout the day. I couldn't, I couldn't study that well. I would have issues like, trying, if I would want to work out, I wouldn't have the energy to work out. I also noticed I had like a couple nosebleeds too, which I thought was kind of weird because I never really had those before. I had neck pain that kind of started coming on to like, just like a little tension, headaches and stuff. Oh yeah, headaches was another one. I started getting headaches probably actually back around my mid-teens. So this had been kind of an ongoing issue already for like a couple years before I even went to college. I also started having like sinus issues as well, which I had also been kind of an allergic person as well. Like seasonal allergies was a big deal for me. And I didn't even know anything about food allergies. Like food allergies, I was like, what is that? But I would have, anytime spring would come around, I would be sneezing. I worked outside a lot as well. Again, being exposed to a lot of ticks and biting insects, from about like 06 to 08, 09 timeframe. And so, I was working as a groundskeeper, with my granddad. It was great times. I love that job. And, I love being outside. What can I say? And, so I was exposed to a lot of, ticks and everything. Like I said, biting insects. And it was just kind of like, I grew up and it was like every summer I would just kind of be expected to be bit, at least once maybe by a tick or something. Not to mention all the mosquito bites, but yeah, so I had a lot of exposure growing up, to these vectors. And I also if weather fluctuations started happening as well, I would start to get like a sinus headache or a pressure headache. So I attribute a lot of those sinus problems and stuff to the weather all the time. I was like, that weather's, it's messing up my sinuses. It's especially during the summertime, like anytime you would have a storm come through, it'd be like, the pressure change. So, I had a lot of issues with, the sinuses going on. I also, I tried doing scuba diving as well. Like, I think, well, that's a little bit later on. So let me finish up with the, yeah, so now I'm in like the 2012 to 2017 time frame. got the headaches. Yeah, so my GI problems, really start getting worse around this time frame, like when I'm in my early 20s. I started having more abdominal pain, more diarrhea. I didn't really have constipation all that much. I had headaches, I had sinus problems. My fatigue was getting worse, and all this stuff is kind of fluctuating. It's not all the time, but it would be like every couple of months I would deal with this thing, and then the next couple of months would be something else. So it was never, all together, and it was really hard for me to paint like any kind of picture really with any of them. And then I started, my dad was also diagnosed with Parkinson's earlier, like in my late teens. So, I had this other stress of, which, it's a chronic disease. So, as time goes on, it gets worse and worse. It was a little bit of a stressor, to begin with, because it's something that's different. It's like, okay, well, how do I deal with this? I'm a teenager now. It's a little bit different than what most teenagers go through. So it was a little bit of a difficult time for me. Along with just regular stressors. And oh yeah, I think at this point I also started having like some muscle twitching going on as well. Like in my early to mid 20s, especially like if I would get fatigued, like I was talking about, I would have some of the muscle twitching going on. Again, I was still having earaches and stuff from time to time. Also around this time frame, like 14 or like 15, like 2014, 15, I was using like alcohol as like a coping mechanism as well. So that kind of made my other symptoms flare up more. Just to deal with, the work and like all the stressors going on, like my dad's getting worse. At this point it's like 2017 now. So around the 2016 time frame, I remember I did get bit by a tick, I think that summer as well. And I also tried doing scuba diving. And this is where things kind of start getting a little, wonky. So I, had tried doing the scuba diving thing, and like I was, already had some sinus issues, but I didn't really, think about how that, I didn't really know how I was going to react to the pressure changes and stuff from going down and then coming back up. I just remember I went down, I think we had to go to like 65 feet. So then I came back up, and as I came back up, my nose started bleeding.
Oh.
So I bled into my mask. And then I was also having like really bad earache at the time. So I ended up getting diagnosed with a double ear infection, got some antibiotics, got sent home. And, after that, things really started kind of falling apart. So my GI symptoms got worse. My fatigue got worse. But it was like, I didn't really notice there was any like pattern or anything still. And then fast forward to 2017, like around the winter, like springtime, winter of 2016 to like spring of 2017, I started having like this abdominal pain, like along the ribs that just would not go away. And that's when I was like, well, something's going on here, but I'm not quite sure what. And I was also having like some discomfort and stuff like in my throat as well. My fatigue was increasing. And then I also, I would say like I started having some pelvic pain syndrome type symptoms as well. So, some urinary issues like interstitial cystitis type, issues. Fast forward like a few more months, my abdominal pain is worse now. Now it's like mid 2017. And I go on this like West Coast baseball trip with my friends. My diet's not super great. I had some drinks at the ball game, and then we fly to Las Vegas, or I'm sorry, we drove to Las Vegas for one night and then flew back home from there. And that was like a 10-day trip. And that was probably the most tired I had ever been in my life. It was a great trip. I had a great experience, have a lot of great pictures from it, and wouldn't trade it for anything. But, you know, I was super fatigued when I got home. So all my symptoms kind of flared up, right? And during the middle of the trip, I started having this acid reflux, or I thought it was acid reflux, but it felt like my throat was closing up. And it was like by the end of the trip, like I almost couldn't eat anything. Actually, I think I wasn't eating anything by the time I came home. So I kind of changed some things around when I got home. I was like, I'm just tired, and you know, I need to watch what I eat. So, you know, I sort of changed some things around, and you know, I felt better for a little while. Like things did end up getting better. But you know, like a couple months go by, and you know, I go on this hike. You know, it's like getting closer to fall time now. It's like late September. And I just remember I went for this like 6.5 mile hike, and you know, a couple days go by and I start like feeling this you know, itching sensation like from my waist area and my legs, like my groin. And, you know, I have like, you know, within a week, like I have like this, it's literally just a whole body rash from like my waist down that I, you know, pretty much had. And I was just itching all over. And, you know, I ended up itching in the shower one time, and I found like this little itty bitty, it was like a, you know, a poppy seed. And you know, I look at it in the shower and I thought it was chiggers, but now knowing what I know now is probably was baby ticks, or, you know, nymph ticks. But they were just everywhere. And I was definitely not the same after that. Like things went downhill pretty quickly, but it was again nothing that was super evident, like, you know, or, you know, like, like that's definitely Lyme disease or whatever, you know, because I thought I got bit by chiggers. So I'm like, chiggers don't carry Lyme disease or any kind of infection. And, you know, I just, around the fall time of, or I'm sorry, like going into winter now of 2017, like early 2018, I felt like I had an upper respiratory infection. So I was like kind of having a shortness of breath. You know, I couldn't really, you know, get a deep breath, and I was still fatigued as well. And, you know, so I went to the doctor and they gave me like a week of antibiotics, and they were like, here, have this. And I took like a couple, I don't even think I finished those, because my GI symptoms were awful at this point too. Oh, and also, around the same time period, or, you know, so this was in like September when I got bit, probably about October, late October, November timeframe, I had like a pretty severe like episode of diarrhea as well. So, you know, it's just kind of like things are lining up. But, you know, it's like a month later, so I'm not really thinking like, oh, this is tied to, you know, whatever the bit me a month ago. Because like I'm not itchy anymore. So, you know, so then we, you know, go October, November timeframe. Now we're December. I have like this upper respiratory infection, or what I thought was upper respiratory infection. You know, I don't think I finished the antibiotics, and that kind of went away. Like, you know, I'm like, oh, I'm fine. I'm just a little fatigued or whatever. So fast forward about 3 to 6 months now. So it's like, you know, springtime of 2018. And, I just remember I used to ride motorcycles quite a bit too. And I just remember I went and got this one motorcycle I was really, really happy to get. And I drove it home, and like, I ended up having this really bad pelvic pain from riding the motorcycle. And, you know, I was like, that's kind of weird. So it was like the blood circulation was being cut off. And, you know, so I just kind of, you know, shrugged it off or whatever. Like, that's, you know, I ended up getting a aftermarket seat and putting on it, you know, to kind of help with that. But I was still having, you know, pelvic pain anyway. And, you know, fast forward another, I think, like 2 or 3 months, I tried to go back to running. So I was like, well, maybe I can, you know, I need to kind of like help all these health issues. So let me get back into running, because running had been a big part of, you know, it was great for my mental health, because like it helped kind of clear my head. You know, I can go listen to some music. And, you know, I used to run I don't know, like 5 to 6 miles a day, like back in 2015. Because I tried to lose some weight. I did. I ended up losing like 25, 30 pounds that year. Um, and so I was like, I just need to do this again. I'll just get back to running and then everything will be fine. Um, so I tried running like one time or maybe it was twice, and I couldn't even make it like a mile without running out of, air. Like I just had like pretty severe air hunger. So I was like, man, I'm really out of shape. But I don't think that's actually what was going on. So I just think, well, whatever I'd been bit by maybe could have possibly, given me something. I mean, I wasn't really thinking that at the time, but, knowing what I know now is definitely a possibility. And so moving on, like fast forward another year basically, and I still haven't really, like, I've just been kind of dealing with the GI symptoms. The acid reflux is still kind of there. The abdominal pain is still going on. Like, remember the rib pain that I mentioned, like that was still there. And it's weird because like it would come and go. Like, there'd be a few months that I would be there and then a few months that it wouldn't be there.
Were you working
So
all for this time?
yes, I was working all through this time. And at the time, I was working like rotating shifts. So I was, shift work. So I would work midnights sometimes, and then, those would last like a week long possibly. And then, I'd go back to working like, 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. or whatever. So it was definitely, I blamed a lot of my fatigue on that as well, which I'm sure some of it came from that, and not being able to sleep very well. But, I think fatigue could also come from, an infection as well.
Sure.
Um, and so fast forward to like 2019 now. I tried running again. So, it's been almost a year now, like 8 months since or 10 months since I tried running that other time and couldn't do it. Except this time when I tried to run, I ended up getting, I started wheezing, which I had never done before in my life. So, I started to wheeze a little bit, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird. And this was around springtime. So I was like, well, maybe it's just allergies. And now I'm also living with 2 cats. So I'm like, well, maybe I'm allergic to cats. So I was always trying to blame it on something else. And actually about 2 months after that, that wheezing episode, I got out of bed one time. I went to go put my feet on the floor, and it felt like somebody was stabbing glass in the bottom of my feet. Like all of a sudden, I mean, I didn't trip over anything. I didn't hit my foot or anything. It was like just bam, all of a sudden. And I was like, oh, that's really weird. And like at first it was just my my left foot. So I was like, I was kind of blaming that on, this is the foot that I get out of my car on, so I'm like, and I get in and out of my car a lot. So, I ended up, I went and I did acupuncture. I mean, I'm sorry, not acupuncture. I can't think of the word right now. But I was trying to do all this alternative, or not really alternative. What's the word where they go and they like crack your back?
The chiropractor.
Yes. So I was going to the chiropractor, and to try and help my spine and everything. I think I had been going to him already for probably like a year at this point. And my foot's still my foot is still having this issue, right? So I tried to go to him to correct the foot issue, and I wore like a brace on my on my foot. Then I was also I had this cushion that I would sit on, in my car to help with like the pelvic pain. So I had all these, and I'm like, I'm not even 30 yet, I'm like 29, I think at the time. So I'm like, man, this is not good. I'm like, I look like I'm a 60-year-old right now, or I'm living like a 60-year-old. Oh, and then at this point, I get put on the acid blocker for famotidine for the actually I think at the time it was ranitidine for the the acid reflux that I was having, because that was still going on at the time. I'm still having the abdominal pain going on. And I think at one point I literally had abdominal pain for probably 2 years, almost straight. And, a lot of it was blamed on the acid reflux part of it, or just indigestion. And this also includes like gastritis too. And then, so, I'm still, I'm working during all this, I'm going to the doctors, like, I'm being like, hey, I have this or that, and then, I keep getting referred to, I think, I didn't even get referred. Well, I still haven't even been diagnosed with my autoimmune condition at this point yet. That wasn't until 2021 when I got diagnosed with that. So I just kind of dealt with the foot pain, and eventually it went away. So I was like, okay, maybe I did sprain my foot. So fast forward to like 2020, I'm still dealing with the abdominal pain. We have then we have the world event that happened. I'm sure everybody knows what I'm talking about. So that was stressful dealing with that. Then I also noticed like I would just I would have these coughing fits too, like where all of a sudden, I would just have like this strange like tingling sensation in my throat, and I would just have to cough, and like I couldn't breathe when that would happen. Oh, and also I can't even believe I almost forgot to mention this, but one of my scariest symptoms, aside from the heart involvement that I would have later, I had in 2019, so I had the foot pain, I had the wheezing going on, and then I also ended up having issues like later that summer. Like at nighttime, I would have issues breathing sometimes, almost like an asthma type, attack. Where I might wake up and this would happen. And it was like I just could not get any air in or out. So it was like really scary. And I didn't realize it, but apparently Babesia can cause ARDS, which is acute respiratory distress syndrome, which sounds like similar to what I was having, because my oxygen would just like feel like I plummeted. And I was sitting there like trying to like open up my sinuses and just literally just trying to breathe. But I mean, Babesia is scary. I mean, it kills people. So it's a pretty nasty infection. So that happened multiple times, throughout that summer. And again, I'm just blaming it on the cats, or like, oh, I'm allergic to the cats or whatever. So, I think I went and got like one of those mister things, that moistens the air or whatever. And then like I also did some other stuff. Like I would take like sinus medication. That was also something that I would take a lot too, with the sinus medication. So I take that along with the famotidine, and I think I was using like a heating pad sometimes too. Still use the heating pad. I think it's great, but moving on to like the 2021 time frame. So we've had the world event that happened, which I would still have like these respiratory distress issues, from time to time. But it was just very random. Same thing with like the foot pain. Oh, the foot pain also came back as well. Except with my other foot this time. So now it's my right foot. So I mean, this is, at this point I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but it's not good. And I just had a lot of inflammation going on, and GI problems, and just I'm still also a little overweight at this time. I'm like in my upper 230s. Like I think the most I ever weighed was like upper 240s. And generally I'm 6'1", so I should be around like probably like 210, like 200 to 210 maybe. And so I was always a little bit on the larger side. Like I said, I was a larger bone individual. So moving on to like the 2021 time frame, still have the world event that's going on. My dad passes away. And, that's a pretty difficult time frame for me. I'd also decided at the very end of 2020, early 2021, I just decided not drink anymore. I'd been drinking less and less every year that this was going on, but by then I like completely just did not drink at all because I decided I didn't like the way it made me feel, and I hadn't liked the way it made me feel for multiple years. So I just stopped drinking. And I was always a beer guy too, so beer was my my favorite. But I just was like, I don't enjoy it anymore, so I'm not going to do that. So I cut that out. That was the first thing to go, and then I was still having like difficulty like swallowing sometimes, because of like the I was kind of like the GERD type situation, but I ended up going to the doctor a couple times that winter, like early 2021, with I'm like famotidine is not working anymore. I'm like I think they had me on omeprazole too, and I'm like, yeah, this ain't working. I'm like, something ain't right. And so they eventually agreed to do an endoscopy, because they tested me for like H pylori, and they're like, oh, you're good, and all that good stuff. So I do end up doing an endoscopy, and they're like, oh, well, congratulations, you have celiac disease. Well, so I ended up having to do a blood test to confirm it. So, I ate some gluten for like a month, and, did the blood test, and they're like, okay, you got like 3 out of 5 positives or whatever. So you have celiac disease. I'm like, okay, finally something concrete. So, out of all these years, I'm like, I probably had this for years and didn't know. So I'm like, I'll just stop eating gluten and I'll be fine. I was the farthest thing from the truth. So I ate gluten-free for like a good, 3, 4, 5, almost 6 months probably. And I'm still having like, pretty bad reactions. Actually the summer of 2021, I had something that, I partook in, I think that a lot of us did, in this world event, trying to help out. And, I had an adverse reaction to that. So, I had like, again, the panic feeling, but it was multiplied times 10, 100. So I felt like I thought I was going to die before. I really thought I was going to die this time, you know? And I think my resting heart rate was like 130, 140. So like I was running a marathon, but I was literally just sitting still. So that was pretty scary. And like I was like, well, everybody was saying that it was anxiety. It's anxiety, right? So I'm like, maybe it's just me, maybe it's my head. And I moved on, and silly of me, but I tried to work out, a couple of times, and I somehow survived. But I would have these reactions where it's almost like I feel like now it was probably I just didn't have the hormones to deal with the stress of working out, and so literally, it's like adrenal insufficiency, and I mean this can kill people too. Like if it's acute enough, it's like literally. I think the process is like you dump a bunch of sugar, I'm sorry, like your cortisol is high or it spikes or whatever, so then you dump a bunch of blood sugar, glucose and everything, and then your insulin comes up to try and match all that glucose that's been dumped, and then like you get depleted of glucose basically. So then you're left with like nothing. So then like your body's trying to scavenge like all these nutrients and everything to try and burn for energy. So because anytime I would try and work out or do anything physically demanding, I would have these reactions where like my heart rate would spike, and my blood pressure I would feel like my blood pressure would drop, and then it would spike, to try and it was like it was trying to fill a void almost. and it was just really distressing time at that point. So moving on, you know, I didn't really experience a lot of issues. So I'd also go to the pulmonologist for the breathing issues, and they did the breath test analysis and everything, and they're with your breathing in, breathing out, and they're like, okay, well, you're a little bit below like your age or whatever, or like you're showing that you're probably older than you actually are. But they're like, oh, you're fine or whatever. And so they just gave me like a little inhaler, and they're like, here, take this whenever you're having like one of these episodes or whatever. So I'm like, okay. So I think I used it like one time. So I'm still having the abdominal pain. I go and like I'm just a mess at this point, right? So it feels like everything's kind of run off the tracks. And then I tried to do I went to the allergist and I got tested, and they're like, yeah, you're allergic to everything except for like two things. They did a full panel, and they're like, yeah, you're allergic to everything. So I was like, great. I mean, I already kind of knew that, but I was like, at least it kind of validates my feeling now. So I'm actually seeing something. So I'm like, okay, great. I'll just do some I'm sorry, the immune shots. Where you go and take the shots. For some, like I had to do 3 shots at one time. And that threw me over the edge too. So now I was reacting to that. I would still have like the spike in the heart rate, the drop in blood pressure, and then the quick increase in blood pressure. And it was just awful, and I would end up running to the bathroom when this would happen, because it's like a allergic reaction, like you have GI symptoms, you have cardiac symptoms, you have a little shortness of breath. So it's like like I said, it's like an allergic reaction. But I think it could also be, just not having the hormones to, like I said, to deal with the stress that you're going through. So moving on, it's like, I did that for like maybe 3 to 6 weeks or something, and then I was like, I just need to stop. So, but my sister actually ended up getting tested because she was having some weird abdominal pains too, and they tested her for alpha-gal allergy. So my first like introduction into like this whole like tick thing was the alpha-gal thing. So I asked the allergist like, hey, can you test me for the alpha-gal, because my sister has this and she has kind of similar GI symptoms to me. So they test me and they're like, oh yeah, you have alpha-gal. I'm like, okay, so can you test me for Lyme disease then? Because at that point I kind of thought maybe I could have Lyme disease, because I'm like, I've been around ticks a lot. The 2017 incident was still in my mind, pretty fresh in my mind still. And they're like, oh, we're not going down that rabbit hole. And I was like, okay. So, that kind of sucked. But then I ended up going to an acupuncturist, and she's been great. And she kind of tested me alternatively for Lyme disease and other bacteria, and she's like, oh yeah, you definitely have Lyme disease. She has like this different like muscle testing that she does, and or it's like an energy testing. So, I started getting homeopathy for that. And then also I did the ear acupuncture as well for the alpha-gal. And so I did that. I did the acupuncture first, then I did homeopathy, which that's been great for me. I think it's been very beneficial. And I started getting into, looking at like, well, actually starting in 2021 when I got diagnosed with the autoimmune condition, celiac disease. I was looking at, what does the body need like to survive? Like what food is, what nutrition actually is, because nutrition was kind of like a foreign name to me. Like I knew it had to do with like food and like, what I didn't even know like what different minerals there were. I'd heard of like magnesium, but I didn't know what electrolytes you needed, and all like I knew there were electrolytes, but I didn't know like what they were, like calcium, sodium, magnesium, all this stuff. So I started looking into that more. All the different vitamins that you need and everything. I started getting more interested into like alternative therapies and holistic healing and stuff. As 2021 into 2022 kind of unfolded. And I was also kind of looking also into like healing mentally as well. So like kind of doing the brain retraining, and whatnot. So I started going to see a therapist and stuff, or counselor, to help with that. So we did some EMDR stuff to help with that, which I think has been great. And yeah, I mean, just really, it was a long road, and looking back on it, just even now, I'm like, dang, this is a lot of information, a lot of issues that I had, and then even, since all this, like I'd had, this numbness and tingling in my fingers. I had like weird, like vertigo type symptoms, where like I'd be sitting still, but stuff would feel like it was moving. So not quite vertigo, but just, like motion stuff. That was pretty scary. Like my eyes would bother me sometimes. I still have kind of red eyes from time to time. And
I remember
yeah, I mean,
reading that the red eyes can be a symptom of Lyme, which I was not totally aware of. But again, how many symptoms are there? And you poor thing, like I'm listening to your story, and it's like hindsight's 2020, right? When we actually understand what's happening to the body. But at the time, I get it. It's like you have all these wonky little symptoms, or not really little, but more like isolated, that maybe you're seeing a different person each thing, and they're not seeing the whole picture. And so when you actually go back and you see that whole picture of what your poor body's been through, it's like, oh my God, this is definitely Lyme. Like I see it so clearly now.
Right.
But the path on the way there is not very clear at all for so many people.
Right.
You look back, it's like, oh, I see it. So I'm glad you're able to get a diagnosis. And I feel terrible that you were actually at a doctor that told you have alpha-gal, which we know is a tick-borne illness, but wouldn't test you for the remaining tick-borne illnesses. That's a sad state of affair. And I feel like that happens a lot to people as well. And I just want listeners to understand that sometimes, for whatever reason it is with these sicknesses, it can be problematic to find someone to test you and to test you accurately. To reiterate, just the standard testing, even if you were to have gotten access to that there, potentially is only 65% accurate. So maybe you wouldn't even have really gotten a true diagnosis anyways, had they tested you. But just be wary that those tests are not an end-all be-all. And as you've talked about many times, Ethan, there's other co-infections. There's other sicknesses that a tick can transmit to people, and that Lyme test is only looking for Lyme. So that you were able to find a different option for yourself to help you to get more onto the healing path, instead of the what's wrong with me, let's just throw poop at a wall and see what sticks kind of an approach, and hopefully something will help me to get better. And you just keep grasping at straws, and you think like, oh, maybe it's because I'm stepping out of my car on that foot. I've done many of justification that way with some of my symptoms, and it's like, what else do? You kind of feel like a crazy person because you're left being told it's stress, or it's this, or it's that, and take this pill and go on and you'll be fine. But proof that that's not how this works at all.
It's not the case. Right.
Yeah. And so once you began, well, I'm also curious, when did you go to the Health Institute? At what point?
So that was this past winter. So it was like a semester course that, you do online, and it's kind of like you go at your own pace, kind of through the material. And, I thought it was great because it's kind of, it's based in Ayurvedic, biblical, and Chinese medicine. And then also kind of a good overview of like nutrition and, what a good base that is. So, everything that it should include, and how different people can, do better with different foods. So that's the Ayurvedic part of it.
Yes, I'm familiar with that. Being an Ayurvedic practitioner myself, I really have a great love of the Ayurvedic practice and the teachings and lifestyle of Ayurveda. I believe very much in that, and just keeping body, mind, and soul balanced. Touched a little bit on that with nutrition. And that's, again, I watch a lot of your videos, and a lot of it has to do with nutrition, or more like herb based, or I keep thinking about berberine and some of the other herbs that you've talked about on your show, and like fatty liver and some of that stuff as well that you touch on. And I just really like how you are able to relate that information. Like, you remember stuff so well. I feel like when you're talking about it, I'm not that detailed that way. So I really appreciate that.
I don't have the best memory, but
you do.
I appreciate it.
In my opinion, I watch and it's like, gosh, how does he remember all this? How does he know all this detail about these things? But so would you say then potentially that you've gone and learned that just to help yourself in your own journey? Is that kind of what spurred that desire to go that way? Or
yeah, and I think at that point I was, also wanting to help other people as well. Like I knew, how miserable I was, and also, I wish, knowing what I know now, what I could have done to help my dad. So, I just see so many similarities in a lot of his symptoms, to those with, with chronic Lyme disease. So, I want to be able to help other people who are going through the same experience, and help them overcome, and get stronger and be able to, thrive. So, and have a good life.
yes, and I appreciate that about you tremendously. And I know we had talked about it in chat before with your dad potentially. But I couldn't help but to ask about Lyme or tick-borne illness too, just because I'm bringing this up only because I want listeners to understand. I did see a study published not that long ago that stated 5 out of 5 people with Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, why do I always forget the name of this one? Like, I think I've
dementia.
Thank you. Like, oh God, I always worry myself when I can't remember these things. But 5 out of 5 of those people had Lyme spirochetes in their brain, right, in their tissue once they actually autopsied them. And so it is something to be of consideration. Chris Christopherson was diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's, and they wound up giving him antibiotics and figuring out that it was Lyme, and he got a lot better. And so just be mindful to, for our audience, that sometimes these things mirror, like Lyme is the great imitator and mimics so many things.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing that I kind of forgot to mention was about the heart involvement too. So like whenever I would try and like do something physically active, or like go up the stairs, or like go up a hill, I would kind of have that. I would also kind of have like a lower heart rate, although not low enough to be super concerning to to doctors, because I wore a heart monitor. I did an echocardiogram, and everything came back normal. But I would still have this like inability to to work out basically. So, and that's because Bartonella, Lyme, Babesia, they can all infect the heart, the heart muscle, the different layers of the heart, and have interfere in that upper to lower chamber, like that, the talking between the two of them with the electrical conductivity. So I think that's been a big issue for me, but Hawthorne has been great for that, along with many other things. But, I have noticed an improvement in that. So I've been very happy with that.
Yeah, that's very good for your heart, Hawthorne. And I'm glad that you're seeing some improvements with yourself and your body. Again, it sounds like it was left to run free for a long time in your body. And so it takes a little bit of elbow grease, as I say, to get it back out, next to God's exorcism of our of our bodies, right? Like, please get
Right.
it out. It takes a lot is what I'm trying to say. And so I applaud you for learning, for being curious about how to fix yourself, how to share that information with others, how to get yourself back on track again. Would you say, how are you doing with your healing process? I mean, how do you feel? Like, are you like 70% back? Are you able to see it like that yet at this point? Or
I would say I'm probably like 65% better maybe. I still got a little ways to go. I was still having, minor like GI issues, but way, way better, especially compared to last year. The heart symptoms have gotten a lot better. Still not 100% there. I'm still having some TMJ problems, and some neck discomfort sometimes. Actually, fairly recently I did have like a little flare up or reaction. I think that came from a combination of a few things, but it's not, you can't let that, you know, get you down. Like you have to keep going. And it had been like a year and a half since I had like a reaction like that. So, in my mind, I'm like, well, maybe I've, flared something up, like I'm actually like working on another infection possibly that could be there, or, I think part of it was also just reacting to something I was taking. So, just kind of like learn from it and move on. So,
yes, and I often talk about this with other people that we have on the show, is that healing is not a straight line out. And that's the hard thing, is like there are a lot of ups and downs, and you're making really good progress, and then something happens and you just kind of take 20 steps back, but you just keep going again. And I think the duration of time of those episodes is lessened, hopefully over time, as well as the frequency. But it's just like you're saying, keep going and don't get too caught up on these things when they happen to us. Even I, like, something will trigger, and it's been years really since I've been sick, and I'm like, like, and it's like, okay, just breathe. You're not getting it again. Like, it's okay. Relax. Like,
right.
Work through this. And it passes, but it's stinky when things like that flare up every now and again. Just don't get panicked with it. Don't get too caught up with it. Don't get too attached to it, and just know it's only temporary and it'll go away again.
Right. You can't let it bring you down. And it could be a clue to like look and see what's going on maybe, in your life. Has anything changed? But or maybe to, reevaluate like I had changed some things around in what I was taking. So I was like, well, maybe I'm, and I was also kind of pushing kind of hard too, with like the antimicrobials and, just trying to detox, like, or not really detox, but, just trying to kill off stuff. And, I think maybe I just needed to listen to my body, because I've been like kind of pushing myself and just kind of like, just rest and relax for a little while. So, just seeing what your body needs.
Yeah.
So,
which is not necessarily an easy exercise sometimes to accomplish. And I think that's a great thing to talk about a little bit, is just, through this, I think most of us learn that you really have to learn how to sit with your body and how to listen to it a little bit better, because obviously when things like this start going wrong, there's something like very wrong in your life, I think, that needs to be addressed. Your body's screaming at you about something for a reason. And so you have to listen. I mean, if you don't, obviously you're just going to have a worse outcome, but to train yourself well enough to listen and to respect what your body's saying to you, and to be okay with that and to honor it. But that's not an easy thing to do sometimes. And then I think you had talked about it a little bit more, but like on the spiritual side, did you really do a lot of stuff that way to kind of help yourself? Or
yeah, I mean, I used to go to church quite a bit, and I'm not going to church, but I got back more into getting in touch with the spiritual side, praying and, listening to, some sermons and stuff, and just trying to reconnect with that whole side of me. Cause I think it is important to have, that kind of, at least giving that side of you some attention, in order to, kind of, I just think it's really important for healing because, you have to be able to connect with that part of you and to be able to, to have some peace, and, also just, putting it, in God's hands and stuff, and not, having to take on everything yourself. So I think that's really important.
Yes, I think that's a very, very good point to point out, is that, sometimes we want to control this so badly, and sometimes we have to just really let it go and give it over to God, and just know that He's with you. He, she, it, whatever people want to refer to
Right.
God, that power is always with you, and you're never alone. There's no way I could have made it through the dark times that I did without somebody carrying me, I assure you.
Right.
So I thank you for opening up a little bit more about that. Can you tell me, was there any specific time in your head that you knew that you were going to heal? Like, was there ever a moment when you're like, yes, I see it. This, like, for me, I always had like hawks and stuff swooping down in front of me. That was like my sign. I'm like, okay, I see it. I know I'm healing. And I would just have this sensation come over my body of like, yes, I'm getting better.
I think, there was a point where I was like, I just, I'm very determined sometimes, and very stubborn also. And I was like, I'm going to get to the bottom of this, and I don't care how I'm going to do it. So, I started changing things around. I changed my schedule around. I took a different position so I could, try and work with my sleep. So yeah, I would say probably 2021, like, like when I was, later part of 2021, when I started, kind of getting into the bottom of things, like, I went to that acupuncturist. I was like, yeah, I'm going to get better. I don't care what it takes, cause I care about, my family, like, I think about my siblings and my mom and my grandparents, and I'm like, I want to be there for them. So, and I'm the eldest son, in my family. And, so it's been, I just look at my granddad. He worked till he was like 80 years old, and, so, he's a great role model for me. So, I was like, I'm not giving up.
That's good. I'm glad that you have those people to support you and to give you a little bit of motivation and reasoning with yourself to like, yeah, I can do this. I got this. I'm going to do this. You have purpose for that.
Yeah.
I think sometimes maybe people get lost because they don't even have that. And so that's a really beautiful thing to be grateful for and to have. Can you tell me, is there anything that you would like the listeners to know that you think might be able to help them or give them a little bit of different insight with their healing journeys?
Something that they should know or would be insightful.
Maybe valuable or help them with their healing.
I would just say, if you think that you're not getting answers, just keep searching. Because for the longest time I was told, like, oh, it's, anxiety, or like, this is just the way it is, and that should not have cut it. I should have gotten to the bottom of it sooner. And don't let anybody get in your way. If people, want to say otherwise, just, don't listen to them. You got to keep moving forward. You got to do what's best for you and your family.
That's right. That's very good advice. Because sometimes it's like we put so much faith in Western medicine, and that's the end all for many people. And they're like, well, this is just how it's supposed to be. Or I've talked about this with some of my other guests too. And it's like, I wonder how many people are actually sick and don't like the way that it's explained to them. They just accept it and don't really do anything about it. Or they're told like you or I that it's like stress or it's anxiety. And so they're not even thinking it's really medically related when it's actually completely medically related,
Right.
So yeah, definitely good advice. You've got to be your own best advocate and just keep going. And if it's not making sense, I think ultimately I knew inside, no matter how many different diagnoses that I was given, that it just didn't make sense. And like, I gave up for a while. I gave up for like 3 or 4 years and I drank a lot. That was what I did to deal with that, because you just stop talking about it after so long. People think you're crazy.
Yeah.
But then I feel like you, it's like I could have figured it out sooner. I could have, but I mean, like, came to it.
Yeah, and then it's like you're gonna be harder on yourself, right? Like, I should have this, I should have that, and you can't do that. You got to move on. You got to learn from it, and move on.
That's right, because it's hard too, especially when you're sick. Like your brain, I just keep thinking about how inflamed our brains get, and you're not thinking the same way. And like I had a lot more OCD and different mental behaviors too that I attribute to that sickness, and it made it so much harder to be a human. Like it's just hard to be human. And then I guess the last question that I like to ask, maybe I'm a weird, warped individual, but can you please tell me what is the best thing that has happened to you as coming into contact with Lyme and tick-borne illness?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I would definitely say that, meeting new people, having a renewed interest in learning, like, just learning new things, because that's something I have had to been really open to, is learning new concepts, new ideas, almost having like a childish kind of interest or, curiosity, to go out there and learn, because I find like the older I get, the more people tend to be closed off to new ideas, or like they're not interested in learning new things, or they're like, this is the way it is. This has got to be the way it is. And I'm like, not necessarily. You have to open yourself up to other ideas, other opportunities. You can't wall yourself off. So, because if you've done that, you're not going to get any better. So you're never going to recover.
Yes, that's very valid. I think it was Joe Dispenza maybe that I was listening to that said around 30 or 35, our brains just like completely shut off from new connections happening. But we can obviously do things to help make them still there and open up again.
Right.
But typically people's brains will start to, I don't want to say atrophy, but just like close off, and we get very set in our ways, and it's hard to put new information in there. So
right. Yeah.
That's a good gift for sure to have gotten out of this. I mean, if there's something that you can get, I think that's a pretty good one.
That's why I said my memory may not be what it used to be, but I'm still trying to go out there and learn new stuff, new concepts, new ideas. The human body is an amazing, extensive, it's like a chemistry set. So, you got to go out there and you got to learn all this stuff, because, I learned about cellular health, digestion, a lot of psychology type stuff, all this stuff with like infectious diseases. I mean, the list can go on and on. And I mean, people spend their careers looking at each one of these, and I mean, they still don't know everything. So it's mind boggling. So
it is, but that's the beautiful thing. It's like, you can always learn. There's always more to learn. And
right.
I think you said it very well, though. It's like, you've got to be open to this stuff. You've got to be willing to ask these questions. You've got to be willing to do this to heal. Like, I mean, I guess some people probably just magically get better. But
yeah,
I've not met very many of them. If you're one of the listeners who's magically healed yourself from Lyme without doing any of this stuff, please contact me. I'd love to have your story on here.
I mean, like when I was told like, oh, just eat a gluten-free diet and you'll be healed. I was like, that just seems so simplistic to me. And the other question would be like, well, why am I having this autoimmune reaction, in the first place? Like, why, I get that I'm reacting to the gluten, but like, what caused me to react to the gluten in the first place? So, same thing with my keratosis pilaris. I was told like, oh, that's genetic. okay, well, why are my genes expressing in this way? Because it's actually started to recede. So, for the first time in, 25 years or whatever, my red bumps are finally going away. So, I mean, it's great to be able to see this stuff.
That's the kind of stuff though, that's like the proof is in the pudding. I get excited about,
Right.
because it's such a hard thing to measure, right? It's such an intangible illness, like it's all inside, but then you have
Right.
stuff occasionally, like you can see on the skin or the tongue out,
Right.
whatever it is. And it just helps to encourage you, because it's like, I can visibly see this difference. I can, I know what I'm doing is working.
Right.
That's fantastic. And would you attribute that to herbs that you take? Are you putting anything on that?
I'm not taking anything like on the skin, dermatologically, but I am taking, I've heard or seen where keratosis pilaris could actually be like a omega-3 deficiency. So I've been taking a lot of cod liver oil, the vitamin A, or actually, I'm sorry, not like a vitamin A deficiency, and an omega-3 deficiency as well. So by taking the cod liver oil, I'm able to get those. So I think I attribute that to, being better skin. But I mean, there's other things I'm taking that I'm sure has been helpful, but I think that's probably been one of the better things for my skin.
Yeah, cool. Do you eat ghee? Ghee? Is that something that you're familiar with?
Oh, ghee, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Maybe you can try it, like, or even regular olive oil. But I'm thinking, like, if maybe the unctuousness from the inside out, you could only, like, eat more of that stuff with good healthy fats that come out into your skin.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing, is just trying to balance the fats. Yeah, because trying to eat less soybean oil and canola oil, and just trying to get more of the the better fats, like avocado oil, olive oil, cod liver oil, stuff like that. The ghee. So
I'm a ghee horse.
yeah, I mean, so I was dairy free for quite a while, and still don't eat a lot of dairy because of the alpha gal.
Yeah.
So, but ghee is something that I would like to have. So
have you tried, like, I'm wondering, because supposedly it doesn't trigger that in people. So I'm just curious because of the way that it's made and whatnot.
I mean, I have been having some cheese, so maybe that's something that I'll have to try, here shortly.
And do you do
because I have been wanting to like cook with ghee, just to get that good fat. It's really beneficial for you.
And flavor. I went dairy free for so long. I'm not trying to rub it in. I got to remember this when I'm talking to people. I'm going to be cautious, but I didn't have that taste for so long. And then someone was telling me about ghee, and I was like, all right, I'm going to try it. I'm going to just see how it goes. And I did not have any problems. And it was just like, I cried to have that taste in my mouth again. It's kind of stupid, but like, it had just been so long since I had that like buttery flavor, and with it, it's delicious. But again, I have to sort of be more mindful of people. I'm sorry. Like,
it's all good.
Yeah. And I'm curious too, like, have you tried goat's milk products at all?
Yeah, so I have had some goat's milk. Generally since being dairy free, I've done the not avocado. I typically do like almond milk. But because goats are still mammals, I wasn't having anything mammal related, because they could still be bit by ticks and have this alpha gal. So I was just kind of avoiding anything that was from mammals. For probably a good year and a half. So, but then I started getting, I was really careful about like, eating out and stuff and getting it cross-contaminated, but now I don't really worry about it that much. So sometimes cheese ends up in my food and I don't really think about it that much. So.
Okay. So then help me with this too. Cause I always thought alpha gal, you just couldn't eat red meat or like certain meat products. So I guess my brain's not understanding it correct in that it's just mammal products.
Well, yeah, so it could be in milk too. So I just didn't have any milk.
I didn't really think about that. Again, attributing it to meat, not dairy.
And it could even be more extensive than that. It could be, like magnesium stearate could also be made from like animal fat as well. So like in your supplements, it could be in there as well. So people could react to magnesium stearate. Also natural flavors as well can also be mammal products. So it's a lot of stuff, a lot of
Yeah.
stuff to consider.
Well, thanks for talking about that more, because I'm not,
Mhm.
you're the first person I've met who has alpha gal, but I mean, I've read
Oh.
about it, I don't,
Mhm.
I don't have it, so I don't know. It's funny when, like, I don't know the specifics of every tick-borne illness.
Mhm.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, because that teaches me, and I hopefully teaches our listeners more about that.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, if you're somebody who's like severely allergic to it, then yeah, I mean, you might want to avoid all that stuff, at least starting out. And you can be treated for it, by an acupuncturist. And as I was, and it definitely helped out my recovery, I think, because I had so much inflammation going on, it wasn't even funny. I mean, it was a sad situation. And I spent the last 2 years trying to recover. So, but
you the last 2 years recovering because you're actively doing it, right?
right, yeah,
Not just
it's
trying to doing it.
yeah, it's a long process, but it's always, and it's not linear, but I'm on my way up. So,
That's right. And I mean, how long were you sick?
oh, probably like 20, 25 years.
So like, I know for me, it was at least 7 years, but possibly when I was 20. So that would have been more like, I don't know, 13 years before I actually figured it out.
Mhm.
And where's my head going with that? Oh, it took me like 6 years. Like, I just looked and I was like, oh my God, it's been almost 6 years since I was diagnosed. Like, that's insanity. But it has taken me that long. I don't want to discourage you either, but it's taken me that long to like
Mhm.
get back to 100%,
Right.
And I keep saying
Yeah.
like 98% because occasionally I still have a twinge of it, and I'm like, but it's in stressful times or towards my period.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
still tied with my hormones, I'm sure. Um,
Mhm.
but that's the thing, is like, that's been in your body for so long. So I wish it was poof and it's out of you, but it takes a lot of work and dedication and consistency, right? Like, it's hard sometimes
Yeah.
to do every day, but over an extended period of time, and you're consistent and you just keep coming back and showing up, even if you have to take a break for a minute, it
Mhm.
matters, and you just keep building your wall to climb out of the hole of darkness.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a long road, and it feels like can be very lonely sometimes. But that's why we have such a great community. To be able to talk with one another, and to bounce ideas off one another, and to learn from each other. So and I think that's pretty accurate. You said it took 6 years to pretty much get most of the way recovered.
Yeah, it'll be 6 years at the end of this month that I actually got a diagnosis.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, and see, that's the thing. I never had like an official diagnosis by an MD, and I just have my symptoms, and then what the acupuncturist has told me, and the fact that I also have alpha gal as well. So
I
it makes
kinda
sense
shared
that
that.
these would kind of run together.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just been a little bit of a process, and I feel like I don't need that validation from them, because I already know in my heart. So um, I don't have to be told by anybody else. So I really don't care about that. I just know how much exposure I've had, I mean, these things are vector-borne, infections, and like Bartonella can come from a gerbil or a hamster, or an animal, or it can be, yeah. It's called cat scratch disease, but so much more carries it than a cat. And it could be fleas, or it could be mosquitoes potentially, or of course we know ticks. So it just makes sense that. And I got bit by a hamster when I was around like 8, 9, 10 years old. So I'm like, and that's when my symptoms kind of started too. You remember? So I started in like 98, 99 time frame. So I've been like 8, 9 years old. So it kind of makes sense that I start having symptoms around this time. I got built, we had a hamster or a gerbil or whatever, and, I got bit a couple times by it. So I'm like, maybe not. I don't know. But, I also remember getting bit by a bunch of ticks when I was like, in my early younger years too. So I'm like I said, it was just kind of okay, it's summertime. I'm probably going to get bit by a tick at least once this year. So.
And I wonder too, at what point, I just feel like when I was a kid, a little bit older than you, but not that much, and like we played out in the woods all the time, and I don't really ever remember having ticks on me. My mom was pretty diligent about putting stuff on us, though. We didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But then I wonder, like, did the concentration of ticks increase over this time period? I suspect yes, obviously, if you look at the map.
It could be.
But then is it just simple enough mathematically speaking to say, okay, so if there's that much of an increase in the tick population, then there would be that much of an increase in tick-borne illness that they carry, to respectively speaking. I know here in Pennsylvania, the tests that they've done on ticks, 1 out of 2 ticks out of like 20,000 ticks was infected with tick-borne illness. Like, so your chances of, if you're remembering multiple times of getting bit just by ticks, let alone all the other stuff that you're talking, like there's definitely a pretty high likelihood that if that's true, if it's 1 out of 2 ticks, you had a pretty good shot of it. But
right, it's just a matter of time before you get something.
yeah.
So, and then especially in 2017, like when I had all those bites, whether it was chiggers or ticks, or maybe it was a combination of a few, that was when things really went south. So even though I'd already been experiencing the abdominal or the rib, what I call rib pain, but of course, I know now that that Spartanella could possibly be. It could also be Ehrlichia or Anaplasma. So it's it's a lot of stuff out there. I didn't realize that there were all these co-infections too. Like I just thought it was one Lyme bacteria.
That's what I think.
And then come to find out, there's a whole bunch of different strains of Borrelia too. And it's like, I'll have some friends that'll be like, or actually, no, I had a coworker that got tested for Lyme disease, and I was like, oh, which test did you do? And he was like, oh, just whatever my doctor ordered. And I'm like, okay, well, because he got a negative, and I'm like, well, what strain did they test for? He's like, I don't know. I'm like, he's like, there's more than one strain. I'm like, yeah, there's like literally 100 different strains.
100 or yeah,
hundreds, yeah.
300 in the world, but
and then that's not even mentioning the co-infections. So it gives me chills thinking about it, because I'm like, that's just crazy.
Yeah.
And then you can also get viruses too. So it's not just the bacteria.
Yes, which is just such a disservice to people, but that's partially why we talk about it and why we share what we do, so we can help people to be better educated and they can understand differently that test is garbage. And I mean, you don't really need a test. Again, like you have a tick-borne illness. Like I don't know how else you would have got the alpha gal. Like, I mean, there's maybe other ways, but like something bit you and gave you that. Like it just doesn't.
Well, I mean, the alpha gal definitely comes from ticks. So I mean, it makes sense that I could have also gotten Lyme disease. So, but I just find it odd that nobody wanted to test me for it. So even though I had mentioned it multiple times, like I could have this or whatever, but nobody ever followed up with it. So I think my doctor might have laughed and said, or, like kind of chuckled and been like, when I said I was doing homeopathy for it, and was like, oh, that's good or whatever. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
But he didn't offer to do any testing for it. So.
No, I've been met with that answer before too. Like healing because I had HPV then and almost cervical cancer, blah, blah, blah. Because I just think the Lyme was left rampant. But I would remember sitting there and I'd be like, I'm taking this and I'm doing that. Tell him all the stuff, and he's just like,
I mean, they're just going to nod along and be like, okay.
He sort of, I mean, he supports me, which I appreciate, but he knows I'm going to do what I'm going to do.
Right. I mean, they're like, if you're getting benefit from it, I mean, that's great, So, I mean, they're not going to say don't do that. So,
no, hopefully not. But I've had people's doctors tell them not to do certain things, and it's like, okay.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not just, the mental and like spiritual part of it, so you have the EMDR, like the brain retraining, you have the spiritual part of it, then you also have, like the physical part of it as well, like, just taking care of your body, through food or exercise or whatever, and then you also have like all these other alternative things too, like, I did salt floats to help out, which was great, getting all that magnesium, because trying to replenish my minerals was like really important. And then doing stuff like red light therapy, or, I never did any red light or infrared sauna, but, I've heard that's really good for people too. If you're not able to get out and motivate, and, do a walk or, exercise, like I had an exercise intolerance, but I could still go out and walk at least, get moving. Because that's really important. I noticed if I don't get out and like move a little bit, like I do feel a lot more stiff and crappy the next day. So
Yes.
that's really important.
Yes, very much so. And I tell people, even if they're wheelchair bound or bed bound and they can't actually like do anything like that, just to even breathe, just breathing exercises to breathe life force through you to help just to move your lymphatic system or get more oxygen in the blood, whatever it is to help put life back to you is really important.
Yeah, like in Chinese medicine, they say the breath moves the qi. It moves the qi, which is the the life force in your body. So
that's right. Prana, we call it in Ayurveda and yoga. Prana is our life force energy, and that's very important to take those breaths and to breathe fully and bring that life force energy into the body. And that's one of the best ways to start.
But I mean, like for people like me who, like we're having like the breathing issues, like that's really hard to do though, like, and I still struggle with it sometimes, like, trying to get a deep breath sometimes. It's nowhere near as bad as it was like for, because it was chronic. Like, I couldn't get a deep breath. I was just always like kind of breathing off the top of my lungs. And I was like, like literally for like a year probably. And, I felt helpless because, I went and I did the pulmonology, or, went to the pulmonologist, did the breath, test or whatever they call it. And, I passed. So to them, I just had asthma or whatever.
Oh.
But, it was, it kind of sucks. But, and I think that was probably Babesia. I think that's probably what I got in 2017, because I didn't have the shortness of breath and the chest tightness, all that stuff. So, and that particular parasite, it destroys your red blood cells too, which might have been on the lower side, but not low enough to where the doctors will do anything about it, of course. So, and that fluctuates throughout the day too. So, when they tested it, maybe I was okay. So, and your body is always trying to find that homeostasis, right? So it's always trying to do everything it can to be in the equilibrium, So, a lot of these chronic infections, like your body has different ways of like being able to maintain that homeostasis barely. But, because when a lot of people get regular tests back, when they get their blood test done, like everything is normal.
Yes.
But they can have a chronic infection. So nobody ever, looks into it. So.
Yes. Well, I appreciate your time very much, Ethan. This is super informative, and you've taught me a lot. And again, I've been living in the tick-borne for a long time, and so you've just got a little bit of a different spectrum of sickness than I've encountered before. So this has been very enlightening.
Yeah.
And I appreciate it tremendously, because again, it's just making me sit here and like cringe as I'm saying, oh, have some ghee, have some dairy, have some work, like, and all these things that you weren't able to do, right? And I took them for granted because I could. And so thank you for teaching me that as well.
Yeah. And, I think maybe I could start, dabbling into that probably now, but, it's something I'm going to take lightly, and take, a little bit of time, to get into that and just make sure that I am okay eating that. So.
For sure. I don't need you calling me later and being like, it's your fault, I'm in the ER, you evil woman, you.
Right. Yeah.
No, do not try it on my
I was
urging.
just trying to help.
Yeah, exactly. But I love ghee. It's so good. I put it in my eyes. I put it in my body everywhere.
Mm,
But this has been, again, very enjoyable and very enlightening. So thank you so much for all the education.
absolutely. Absolutely. I hope, if I can just help one person, that'd be awesome.
That's right.
Because I know
And
how much I struggled. So
that's how I feel too. That's it. And then I'm sure that you've helped way more than one person at this point in your life. You've helped me just learn more, right? And so
that's
there's one.
awesome.
And so if you just think about all the other people and the ripple effect that this has in the world and trying to make this a better space for all of us to be together. Can you just tell me one more time, if people want to get in touch with you, you're on
Right.
and YouTube, are you elsewhere, and what you're under?
No, I'm just primarily on Instagram and YouTube. It's on YouTube it's just 123 reset rebuild revive, no spaces. And on Instagram it's 123 subscore reset subscore rebuild subscore revive. So and if you feel like you kind of if you feel like you kind of resonate with my my story or whatever, feel free to there's a link there that you can click on, and it'll ask you to do it'll ask you a few simple questions, and you can kind of just schedule a free consultation with me, just to work with me or decide if you want to work with me or not. So because I'd love to be able to help you out. I'd love to hear what story you have, and also just be able to help you overachieve like your chronic illness, your fatigue, and be able to have give you some direction, and also be able to help you thrive and have a great life.
Yes, thank you for that dedication to helping others and just being there for people and giving them a good safe space to land and to get some clarification about potentially what is really at the underlying root cause of their illnesses, and give them space to fix themselves, right? It's very important for people to be there.
Yeah, because everybody's different. So, you have to have a different approach with everybody. So not everybody fits in one box, like everybody has a different past, different experience, different bacterial loads, different viruses. So it's and then we're all different too, like different food might work for one person, whereas it'll be very detrimental to another. So
like ghee, yes.
Yeah, exactly, like ghee.
Now I can at least laugh a little bit about it. I was like, oh God. Yes. Yeah. And that's really important. Bioindividuality is what the word that just keeps coming into my head, right? Like everybody's individual in their own biology and their own composition of being. And so it's really important to suss out what works for you specifically as an individual and really what's happening with you as an individual. We have these classifications for what potentially might be happening, like Lyme disease or like tick-borne illness, but really what does that mean to you, and what are your levels, and what specific things do you have, and how can you work with those types of things the best?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's really important. It takes a lot of time to do that. So, you go to a lot of these, I'm not, trying to, take a shot at any doctors, but they're time crunched. They have so many patients that they got to get to in a certain amount of time, and like they can only spend 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever, talking and getting your information, and then they have to diagnose you with something. So they kind of look to what criteria do you fall under, and then give you a prescription or treatment, whatever. But that's the part that I love about the holistic part of it, is you're looking at the whole thing, like the whole individual, and everything else that could be affecting them. So I just find it fascinating.
And it is, and the body is an amazing thing. And when you have somebody like yourself that can help you to make sense out of what your body's doing and what it's saying to you, it saves so much time, and it makes it so much easier, and it makes it like you're not a crazy person. Like,
right. Yeah.
You got something happening here, and somebody hears you and they'll help you fix yourself. So
yeah, like I wish I had somebody to, kind of help me, like be like, okay, this is what you need to be doing now. Like, and this is, just being able to connect the dots, because that's the hard part, is like being able to connect the dots when you're stuck in the mud, and or like I almost kind of equated it to, like falling and you can't stop falling, or like not being able to pull yourself up, like you're falling into a hole and you just can't get up out of it. So when you're in the middle, of everything going on, it's like, it's great to have some outside perspective.
Very much so. And somebody who's actually lived it and breathed it and understands it.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I wish you much blessings on your continued journey of healing and health, because I know that you're going to do this 100%, and you'll see it to the finish line. I have no doubt you have the type of mentality that's like, you understand that you've got to fully commit and believe and get there and ask questions and take nothing else. No survivors, like, this is happening, this is how it's going, I'm going to heal, and that's that. So
right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ann. I appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing those 4-leaf clovers. Keep them coming, okay?
Yeah, exactly. Thanks. I'll send some luck your way.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.